Good morning, everybody. Hello. Can everybody come in here, please? We're starting. So, hi. My name's Bob Summerwill. I am the Executive Director of the Ethereum Classic Cooperative. I am a Vancouver native, so welcome to my hometown. Thank you. Vancouver represent. I have been part of the broader... Hey, it's Donald. I've been part of the broader Ethereum community since 2014, when I first met Vitalik here in Vancouver. In 2015, I was in Toronto and took advantage of the largest sort of meetup scene there and really went down the rabbit hole. So I was a speaker at ETC Summit in Korea last September, invited there by Anthony, the former director of the co-op, after I had met him in Toronto at EdCon, where he had been invited by Virgil Griffith there of the foundation. So we have a chain of people who have led to these events that finally culminated in me being asked if I would become the executive director and continue the quest to really build these bridges and to get Classic back to where it should be. So one of the main achievements that we've had this year has been the Atlantis hard fork, which happened in September, where Ethereum Classic added the Byzantium opcodes. So Classic had been a long way behind Ethereum on protocol, and we finally got all of the ETC tribes aligned, and we moved forward. It was not easy, Atlantis. We had some fights, we had some disagreements and misalignments, but we got there. And I think that what we've established there, which Afri here, our hard fork coordinator, had a very large part in doing, was that we've established a working model. You know, we have a functional ECIP process for moving things forward, and you know we know the drill. So we're going to do it again. Something else that's happened recently, which is very personally exciting to me, is Hyperledger Besu. So what happened there is that the Pantheon code base, which has been built by Pegasus, which is the consensus protocol engineering team, they contributed their code base into Hyperledger. So what you have there for the very first time is something that I was personally trying to achieve myself with a C++ client in 2016, which was getting a mainnet compatible Ethereum client that could also be used for permissioned enterprise scenarios under the Hyperledger banner. So Hyperledger, for anyone who doesn't know, is the Linux Foundation's umbrella for open source blockchain projects. And Besu is the first of those, which is a public chain one. All of the previous ones have only been permissioned, but Besu is both. So it's a Java code base, it's got Apache licensing, it's got Linux Foundation governance, it's got an world-class team from Consensus, some of the best distributed systems, cryptographer, Java experts in the world who have built this thing, for 2 years and then basically granted it to the world, given it into that collective governance where the several hundred major companies that are part of Hyperledger can contribute to that. And also, we can contribute. Anyone can contribute. You don't even have to be a Hyperledger member. So the very first thing that is happening within that Hyperledger governance for that code base is the addition of ETC support. So the cooperative is providing funding to ChainSafe to do that work. And that's the very first thing that's going to happen under that Hyperledger banner, is that we are going to have a code base there which can run Ethereum or Ethereum Classic or Clique or IBFT or any of a whole range of things, and privacy mode and all sorts. It's a dream scenario, and we're part of it. And what that gives us is more client diversity, but without that client diversity coming, from a commercial entity that you're having to think, well, what are the motivations? So I think, Besu is going to become a very major client moving forward. You don't have to join Hyperledger to contribute to Hyperledger code bases, but we are anyway. So the cooperative have applied to join Hyperledger, and I anticipate that that's going to complete within the next few weeks. The other thing that we're doing is applying to join the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. That should also be approved within a few weeks. Now, again, my timeline here was that I was trying to get the C++ client relicensed when I worked at the Ethereum Foundation. When that failed, I joined Consensus and spent a year working on getting the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance launched. So I was the co-lead architect during the build-up phase. Then I was the secretary for the technical working group. Then I was the vice chair for the technical steering committee. A lot of that work was actually very parallel with the work that happened on Pantheon, because the other co-lead architect was Shahan, who's the co-founder of Pegasus, who built this code base. As we were going through that process of setting up the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, with the difference being that Hyperledger is a banner for open source projects, EEA is a standards body that's trying to define a specification for saying, what does an enterprise-grade Ethereum client look like? Which is essentially a superset of public Ethereum plus permissioning, privacy, and so on. Also, the EEA and the EF, the foundation and the EEA, they were quite at loggerheads when it started. But they're working together now. So something which has just been announced, and there will be more detail of next week at DevCon in Japan, is a thing that they're running within the EEA called the Mainnet Initiative, where they are really, as should have been happening from the very start, looking to apply the resources of those enterprises to a cleaner, better definition of the public network itself for Ethereum. And I want to participate in that, because really it shouldn't just be the ETH network, it should be all Ethereums. A problem that we had in the specification work for the EEA is that the yellow paper and so on sort of assumes you've only got one network. There are all these implicit assumptions that are tied to block numbers and things in the spec. So really, you want a modular yellow paper, which would say this is what the Ethereum protocol, and here are some specific instances. So that's the sort of stuff I think that we can get to by participating in the EEA, is really get to a better specification for the Ethereum stack, as my friend Boris Mann would say, and that particular chain IDs and so on, those can easily be part of that. The other thing that I've done only in the last few days, actually, I kind of went a bit crazy with it and just piled in, was that we've had this long-standing issue to do with the website. So one of the things that Anthony did in his time at the co-op was make a beautiful-looking new website, which is what was ethereumclassic.org. But that's a WordPress site, which means changes to it have to go through an administrator. So that was Anthony, and then it was passed to me, and then I just didn't do it. because I've been busy doing everything else. And I'm sure that that was much the same for Anthony. In his time was, oh, can you add a link here? Can you make this tweak here? Oh. So what I decided, really, and I kind of did and nobody seemed to object, was go back to the old website. So the old website was just a simple GitHub sort of setup. Anyone could submit changes. Here you go, pull requests, review, commit, and then automated builds push the thing up. So what I've done is fancied up the old one so it doesn't look crap. But then both me and various other people have piled in to update the links to make it, not be bad. And we're already nearly there. So, that where it is as usable, really, as what we had on the WordPress. Maybe a few things still need pulling across, but we can do it. We can get there. And then the other bonus that's happened, which I completely didn't realize, is that, a guy has turned up who did the original website. So Dax, the pseudonymous Dax, who actually made the initial website, is here and wants to help. He wants to help us not ruin his website. Because I have been a little bit brutal, and I maybe haven't been doing things great. So if we have someone that knows the web tech, fantastic. And then the other thing that Yaz was telling me is that Don Xiang, who is the guy who did the graphic design for the summit today, he wants to help as well. So brilliant. We're in this position where anyone can contribute the content. Designers want to come in and do stuff, they can. Anyone can contribute. We're in a position where we can do it together. There are no barriers of only certain people being allowed. It's not entirely permissionless, it is permissioned. But the permission is that a good change or not? Yes, I press the button, we're done. The other thing that I've suggested through conversations with Christian Zhu is I came to realize that a lot of the East-West communication coordination difficulties that we have are to do with the firewall. So if you are in China, you basically can't do VPNs anymore, and that's quite a recent thing. You used to kind of be able to get away with it. Not anymore. They're basically illegal, with very small caveats. So Christian told me, if he is sitting in his office in China, he's got a VPN, usually, it might be a bit dodgy, but usually he can do that. If he's out of the office, if he's home, if he's traveling somewhere, no access. So that means he can't get to Twitter, he can't get to Discord, and those are our primary communication mechanisms. So he's cut off. If he's traveling in other countries, if he's in Korea and Japan, he's fine. So what we see on the other side is, Christian, sometimes you just can't get hold of him. He doesn't answer anything. He's useless. What's going on? Totally not the case. It's a complete technical problem. But he didn't explicitly say it, and nobody, until I asked, cared enough to try and work out what was actually happening. So what's happening is that. So what I'm suggesting is, well, what we need to do is, as I say here, I've made a WeChat group. You've got to use WeChat. Everyone has to use WeChat. That's the only way to, for that to work globally. So I've made a channel, ETC Global Communications. Purpose of this channel, to bridge the East-West communications gap, we need a medium that works behind the Great Firewall. That is WeChat. Christian tells me he only has VPN access at the office, or when outside of China, it's not an issue, which means that Twitter and Discord are useless. We need to use WeChat, and then we can have good global communication. Beyond just China, we need to be connected for communications with community leaders in other Asian countries, and also in Germany, Italy, France, etc. So what I'm proposing, now that we have this website development working, where everyone can contribute, there's a caveat to that, everyone. Not people in China, yet. Both because of VPN issues, but also just, this is an English language site only. The Chinese, there's two main Chinese groups. And they have their own different sites with different information on them. So we're pouring all of this value into trying to have, canonical good information to point everyone at. That isn't the same information that you get in China. So what we can do, and what I'm proposing, is firstly, we coordinate, so we've got those communication channels with WeChat, and secondly, we just add proper localization into this website, like a normal website that professional people build. Multi-language support in websites is not a weird thing. We should be able to do that. And especially if the guy that made the website is helping us. So we can do that, and that's the plan. I want to work with all groups in any country that would like to have localized versions of this official website. So for China, there you go, that's nice and easy. But A.S, a community member, has already volunteered to help with German and Russian. And I'm sure there will be people in France and Italy and in Spanish communities everywhere who would like to have a workflow where they can have a localized version of this website. If new content is added in English, you'll see it in English until somebody has done a translation into their language, and then that can be replaced. This is a very simple kind of website flow. And I think that just by these few simple steps, we can really unify or build a lot of understanding between the East and West by having communication channels that work so that people can reply to you. I mean, subject to time zones, obviously, that's always a pain. But, not, oh God, someone hasn't replied for weeks. And secondly, by having this potential to say, if you just want vanilla, the basic information, just do your translations in here, job done. If you want to have your own website for culturally specific things, your own meetup details, things that you're like, nobody globally really cares about this, great, do that as well. But at the moment, that's meant the actual basic information on the platform also ends up in that bucket, and it ends up being different and out of date. And, things as simple as, well, when are we, when's the hard fork happening? We get, miscommunication on that. And it's like, how can you possibly not do that? It's in the ESIPs, it's very clear. Yeah, but the ESIPs are in GitHub, and that's behind a VPN. So, anyway. Another thing I'm really happy to announce is that the Cooperative has just signed a contract with Masari. So Masari, for anyone who doesn't know, are basically providing high-quality information on coin projects. Sort of like an Edgar ratings kind of thing. The idea being that investor types, institutions who are seeking high-quality information on particular projects, have got a curated data view, metrics view onto a project. Now, something that Dean Pappas was raising just the other day in his podcast was, if you look at stats in various places, they will say, Ethereum Classic is dead. There's no developer activity. Look, there's nothing. They're not doing anything. Well, that's because they're looking in the wrong place. Or they're not looking in enough places. Because the setup that there is in Ethereum Classic, and it is the same in Ethereum as well, is quite different to many other projects. Lots of projects are kind of effectively centralized. They have a foundation that raises the money. They have one development team, and they have one code base. And they're all in the same place. So you point at that, there you go, that's your truth. That's not the truth for Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, where by design there have been multiple clients from the very start. It was true actually for Ethereum at the very, very start until 2016, because really all of the development was done and funded by the foundation, though there were multiple clients. You had Go Ethereum, you had CPP Ethereum, you had Pi Ethereum, and so on, and they were all in that same repo. That ceased to be true when parity were formed, because all of a sudden parity's off in parity tech. And what you have on Ethereum Classic is now even broader, because you have ETC Labs Core doing Classic Geth, you have multi-Geth off in its own place, you have parity off in its own place. As and when our IOHK friends return to the fold, we will have Mantis in another place. Now we have Bisu in another place. And we also had, the Ethereum project, Ethereum Classic debacle, which may be resolved today, but not yet. Anyway, what we'll have with Messari is basically a questionnaire, gathering all of that information, that going to their researchers, and then them building this curated view onto ECC, which will take account of all of that complexity, and gather information on, sort of DApp usage, adoption metrics, and so on. And the other thing that Messari does is really transparency and financial disclosures, things which are very close to my heart. I've been maintaining since November 2017 a very extensive conflicts of interest statement where I disclose all of my salaries for every job I have ever had, all of the associations I've had in my professional life, my crypto holdings. So just yesterday, for example, I bought some more ETC because it looks very cheap to me. So nobody can accuse me of being a bag holder, having hidden interests, anything. I am an open book, and I would like the cooperative to be just the same. And we're very close to that. We have had these half-yearly reports that have been, reporting on our incomings, our spending, and we'll have even more of that moving forward because we are now a non-profit in the US. We are actually a public charity, believe it or not. That's actually the designation. So if there are any US people here, if you would like to donate money to the cooperative, that's actually a tax-deductible event with the IRS. So please do that. But as part of that, we have to do a filing, which is basically saying this is what we're doing to maintain that status, which is showing what activities are you doing and what are you spending, and are you basically still worthy of that designation? Are you using your money responsibly and fulfilling the goals that you said? So as part of that, again, there will be more of that kind of disclosure, which is very similar to what we have already, but in a structured form. And again, that's going to go into Messari. So what you're going to see in Messari is a very transparent view of both the network itself and the activity on that and the entities that are engaged in the ecosystem. So IOHK and Labs will also be participating in that Messari thing. They're both private organizations, so they're obviously not going to disclose anywhere near the same level, but they'll be in there. So anyway, in conclusion, I'm delighted to be part of the Ethereum Classic ecosystem, and we are really on a roll. I would say we are almost rampant right now, and I really foresee a situation where, in a very short number of months, I really do truly believe that ETC is not going to have been, not just going to be caught up with Ethereum, but it will actually be further along. That the protocol will be objectively better than ETH. That we will have some additional features, small features, that we will not have the bloat, that we will not have the irregular state transition, and also that we're going to be in a position where we have a supportive setup in terms of funding, because this has been a huge problem on the F1 side, that essentially it's been defunded since 2017. And, you know, good people have been trying to make it better, no money. Well, guess what? You know, ETC care, and really what's being built in ETC is really the original Web3 vision, you know, because we still believe, and we're going to do it. So there we go. Now I'll pass you over to Anthony, my predecessor, who is going to give us a talk about the state of Ethereum Classic. Thank you.